Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. I just realized I didn't have my mic on. Shyamala Kishori, Devi Dasi is with us today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Andrea, Athena, Jamuna Jaya, Beth Dunphy. Good morning, Susan Weiser Mason. Good morning, iPhone. iPhone, you have to reveal your identity. Everybody's asking, who is iPhone? Who is iPhone? All right. Shyamala Kishori, the floor is yours.
Hare Krishna, it's really wonderful to be with everybody at the Bhakti Center again. It's always a pleasure to do some service for the Bhakti Center. I recently was involved in a couple of groups that I led for the Bhakti Center over the summer by Zoom, so that was a real honor. I'm currently based in Gainesville, Florida, where I've been involved with the Krishna House community for quite a number of years. And yeah, so let's begin. That's just a little bit about me. Oh, one more thing. I grew up in the Nugaloka community in Hillsborough, North Carolina with my family. And yes, so here we are. Today we are continuing our study of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 16, and we're going to do 3 verses and then 1 purport. So we'll begin with the invocation prayers, and you can feel free to sing them along. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat nashta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati rutamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we'll begin with text 7, and then 8, and then we'll end with text 9 in the purport. So I'll read the translation for the first 2, and then we'll do the verse for the 9th. Jamadagni, the son of Satyavati, was very much pleased with Parashuram and asked him to take any benediction he liked. Lord Parashuram replied, "Let my mother and brothers live again and not remember having been killed by me. This is the benediction I ask." Text 8. Thereafter, by the benediction of Jamadagni, Lord Parashuram's mother and brothers immediately came alive and were very happy, as if awakened from sound sleep. Lord Parashuram had killed his relatives in accordance with his father's order because he was fully aware of his father's power, austerity, and learning. And text 9, I'll do the Sanskrit for this one. Yer junasya sutarajan smaranta svapitur vadham ramavirya parabhuta lebhire sharmana kvachit. My dear King Parikshit, the sons of Kartavirya Arjuna, who were defeated by the superior strength of Parashuram, never achieved happiness, for they always remembered the killing of their father. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Jamadagni was certainly very powerful due to his austerities, but because of a slight offense by his poor wife, Renuka, he ordered that she be killed. This certainly was a sinful act, and therefore Jamadagni was killed by the sons of Kartavirya Arjuna, as described herein. Lord Parashuram was also infected by sin because of killing Kartavirya Arjuna, although this was not very offensive. Therefore, whether one be Kartavirya Arjuna, Lord Parashuram, Jamadagni, or whoever one may be, one must act very cautiously and sagaciously. Otherwise, one must suffer the results of sinful activities. This is the lesson we receive from Vedic literature. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur ulminitam mena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyati Adeshtarne. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So what I would like to do in today's discussion is touch on this verse and purport a little bit, and then I would like to pull out, like we do with a camera, to the wide view of a camera, and just draw back and look at how we interact with the ninth canto, and then particularly how do we handle doubts? How do we deal with doubts that come up from reading stories that we might not resonate with, and so on. So in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that the lesson we learn from the Vedic literature is that we suffer the results of our sinful activities, and therefore we must be very cautious and sagacious. And so this comes to mind, the verse, padam padam yadvi padam natesham. So every step in this world is risky and dangerous. There's that famous verse in the bhajan, Bhajahurimana, where Govinda Das says that life is like a drop of water on a lotus petal, and that at any moment it can teeter off that waxy, how leaves of a lotus are, they're kind of waxy, and the drop of water can just easily float off any second. So similarly, our life is like that as well. So as we're going about life, it's natural that we're going to encounter situations where we offend people, and whether it's conscious or even unconscious, we don't mean to be, and then we're just traversing in life, and we accidentally disrupt someone else's feelings about themselves, and then they get upset, and so on. And so this material world's very sticky, no matter which way as long as we're thinking that we're this body and that I'm in control and I'm this mind and body, then we're going to continually have that feeling that we're being stuck. Oh, I did something here and now I'm stuck. It's very web-like, this material world. And so Prabhupada's warning us that this is a repeated lesson of the Vedic literature, that it's a very, very, we have to proceed very cautiously, because otherwise we are going to have to deal with these sinful activities that come from our results of our actions. So this allows us to become very urgent in taking Krishna's instruction, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, very seriously. So if I'm entangled in this world, no matter what I do, I'm going to upset other people, even if I try so hard not to. It's just a sticky web of material existence here. Every step I take is just entangling me more. That can be a very motivating reason to take Krishna's instruction, that just to surrender to him and he'll take care of everything. He's the only solution out of this problem. So imagine that you're in a dark cave. And I often think about this analogy as we're moving through life, because we don't know what's ahead, right? We're so fallible, we're so conditioned. We don't know what lies right ahead as we're moving through life. And so we can have this analogy of moving through the cave. It's dark. We don't know what's going to happen. We might be accidentally bumping people as we go. And then when we turn to Krishna's instructions in the Gita to give us comfort and shelter, we notice that this luminescent light is ahead. Krishna's there guiding us, and the spiritual master as well, and all the acharyas, that this brilliant light enters our life and we're able to find the exit of this cave. Another analogy that's given in the Shastra is of the material world being like a big, vast ocean, that even if you're a great swimmer, you won't be able to survive in the ocean very long, maybe a couple of minutes or so, or a little more if you're an expert swimmer, but eventually the ocean's going to pull you under. So when we take shelter of Krishna, that vast ocean-like material existence shrinks down to the size of a calf hoof print. And if you think about it, a calf hoof print is so tiny that even a little baby could step over that. So it's allowing opportunity for any living entity in this world, any human who's aspiring for self-realization, to easily step over it when they take shelter of Krishna. So how hope-giving and what a reassurance that we have this help from Krishna and the acharyas and our spiritual masters to get free of this sticky web-like existence. So now I'd like to take a wider perspective on this. We're reading from the 9th canto, and in my experience, having gone through the Bhagavatam, several times chronologically, I noticed across at one point, especially in my 20s, when I was reading the 9th canto, I felt like there were so many pastimes in this particular canto that are challenging to the mind, and I think that many people in the West, particularly, maybe would find some of these stories outrageous or very unrelatable. And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu started to touch on this near the end of his class. And so I'd like to continue that, looking at how do we deal with doubts that may arise as we're reading through the 9th canto. And this can be relevant to dealing with doubts in general. One devotee shared that when I was asking about why there's so many stories in the 9th canto that are very, very difficult to digest, this devotee shared that it's the canto that precedes the 10th canto. And so in one sense, it's extra purifying. So we're going to have to get through these doubts that may arise, and we have to work, kind of churn, some things are going to be churned up, and we have to navigate that and deal with that in order to purify ourselves to enter into the 10th canto, which deals directly with Lord Sri Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. So dealing with doubts from the Bhagavatam, particularly when it comes to thinking about the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it's an incarnation of Krishna. And so it's eternally relevant and potent, delivered by Vyasadeva, an incarnation of Krishna. So if we're thinking about the Bhagavatam in that sense, if it's Krishna and Krishna is eternally relevant and potent, that means the Srimad-Bhagavatam is timeless, and the timeless values of Srimad-Bhagavatam are always there, regardless of what our current condition is or where we are in this world or what's happening politically and so on. So how do we find that timelessness? And often these messages, like Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was saying yesterday, that the story details are not what make the pastime important. It's what the message is that we can extract from the story. What's the point of the pastime? And often that is highlighted. The essences of these stories are highlighted in the purports. Srila Prabhupada extracts those out for us. The previous acharyas extract those out for us, the take-home messages of the purports. And they touch on those timeless values, those timeless messages. But sometimes we don't have a purport, and there'll be just a verse, or even in a purport, we might feel that there's still some things that we're struggling with to understand. So dealing with doubts is a big part of spiritual life, and I'd like to touch on the ways to go about doing that, the approaches to dealing with doubts. So doubts can be useful when they help bring us closer to Krishna, but they can also be detrimental if not handled correctly. In the Oxford Dictionary, doubt is defined as a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. So a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. And there are gradations to this, because it's natural that as we're progressing in spiritual life, there'll be moments when we feel uncertain or a lack of conviction. And as we go through the stages of devotional service, we come to that stage of nishta where we're steady and we're no longer thrown off the cart, so to speak, by different doubts. And so there is that point when a devotee is no longer has any lack of conviction, and nothing can throw that devotee off anymore. And so they're certain. But on the road to that place, we are going to come across this. And so there are two approaches to doubts, to dealing with our doubts. One general approach is dealing with our doubts in a way that turn us away from Krishna. And then the other approach is a way of dealing with doubts that brings us closer to Krishna. So it's very simple. And like we remember, Rupa Goswami says that we should always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So spiritual life can be boiled down to this very two simple things: always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So in dealing with doubts, becoming introspective and thinking, am I using my doubts as a way to stay separate, as an excuse to isolate away from spiritual life? Am I turning it into a weapon that keeps me maybe resentful towards devotees or to our acharyas or to Krishna? So, and this might not always be very conscious, but just reflecting on, how am I wielding these doubts that come up in my life? Are they taking me further away from Krishna, or am I using them to help me become closer? So oftentimes when we're wielding, you could say, the weapon of doubt in a way that's detrimental and becoming critical of devotees or what Prabhupada wrote in a purport or so on, and it can destroy our faith, and our spiritual practice can get reduced, and then it can even lead to isolation. Like, I'm not going to show up anymore, I don't agree with this, I'm not going to go to the temple, I'm going to stay away from those devotees who say such and such, and like that, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So we should do everything in our power as spiritual members of this community to help not only ourselves find a way out of this, but also to be there of support to others who might be struggling with doubts, and to create a community, a culture of shelter where devotees can find others to reveal their doubts to in confidence and can receive the support and encouragement that they need and the answers to their questions. So from our perspective, when we're noticing someone else having a doubt, we can help them, maybe plug them into a certain program or class, or get them in touch with a certain devotee who can answer their questions, or we can do our best to do that and just create that sense of trust that it's okay for them to share. So what about when it's our own doubts? So let's look to ways to deal with doubts that bring us closer to Krishna. It's really exciting in life. I've noticed that, anything that, if we're thinking about, anything can be connected to Krishna and can help me come closer to Krishna, then so can my doubts. And this can be a very hope-giving thought. My doubts are opportunities to actively come closer to Krishna. Remember in the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna is expressing his doubts to Krishna about fighting in the battle? He was really ready to give up. He had dropped his bow and arrow. He was saying, I don't want to do this. And yet he didn't give up, because he turned to Krishna with his doubts. So he brought them to Krishna's attention and said, "O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship?" So he brought his doubts to Krishna. And so we can too. We can do that in that same mood, bringing our doubts. Krishna is the killer of demons like Madhu, and he's also the killer of doubts in the heart. And we can do that where we approach Krishna and say, I know you are my friend. I know you're my ever well-wisher. Please help me with this. So if we look at the examples of great devotees like the cowherd boys in Vrindavan, all these demons are coming, the fire, that's these different pastimes where there's a threat in Vrindavan. And they're not stopping and questioning, why is there a demon in Vrindavan? Life should be simple here. Why is there a fire? Why would God put a fire in our, we're just servants of Krishna. Why would he make us have to go through these obstacles? They're not thinking in the way that an atheist would tend to think, like with these doubts, right? Because they're completely 100% sold out to Krishna. So what they do is they run to Krishna for shelter. With any problem in life, they run to Krishna. And so we can look to those examples of devotees running to Krishna, and we can attempt to do that in our life. We feel this doubt coming up. I'm going to run to Krishna with it. I'm going to take this unpleasant feeling in my heart, and I'm going to turn toward Krishna. And that sometimes might be as simple as just, I'm going to continue to show up for Krishna. Regardless of what's going on, I'm going to find ways to deal with these doubts. And at the same time, I'm going to continue to show up because I know that the solution to my problems is going to be resolved in the company of Krishna. Krishna promises in the Gita that the degree to which we surrender to him, to that degree he reciprocates. And so to the degree that we turn to Krishna with our struggles, with our mental agonies, these doubts that can be so painful, to that degree Krishna will reciprocate, and the answers to our questions and our problems will come to us. So I'm going to touch on various ways to practically do this. And the first thing that's a requirement for all of the following is that humility is necessary. So remembering this mood that I'm small, I'm part and parcel of Krishna. I don't even know what's going on next door, what to speak of what's going on in the universe. Just to put ourselves, to remember our small position and that mood, genuinely, sincerely seeking advice and guidance from those who have more realization. So that's kind of a given throughout the following suggestions that I'm going to give for dealing with our doubts. To have this mood that I don't know anything. I don't even know what's going on in my own body. Like when I'm digesting food, I don't really know how that's happening. I'm theoretically might know, but I'm not able to see that process happening and taking place in my own body. What to speak of in society, the overall thing that's happening, and then what to speak of the universe and many multiple universes and this entire material creation, what to speak of the spiritual creation, right? So Prabhupada would, there's that wonderful story where he does that with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He wanted to remind Tamal Krishna Goswami of the perspective of being a servant of Krishna in this material world. And so he said, there's so many universes, and then within all those universes, there's so many planets. And then he slowly drew it back to, there's so many cities in Los Angeles, and there's one temple, and within that one temple, there's a devotee who thinks he's so special. So Prabhupada's loving way of cutting into that idea of that we might be more special than we are. So remembering our position is the foundation for dealing with our doubts. Okay, I don't know everything. I'm going to look for guidance in this mood of humility. So the first thing we can do when dealing with our doubts is examine our doubt and practice self-reflection and introspection. Why does this doubt have me so upset? What is it about this story? What is it about this pastime that's really getting to me? And perhaps if we're introspective, noticing that it could be because I'm identifying so strongly with this body that I'm in, with this mind, with this condition, with this life that I know, with the things that I've learned. And oftentimes it'll be our identification with our ego in some form or the other. What Prabhupada would often call skin disease, right? This identification with the body, our attachment to illusion. And so cutting through that is what the spiritual master does. And we can ask ourselves, it's just helpful to have this introspective look at our own, the things that we have problems with in the Shastra, with our own doubts, and thinking maybe Shastra is not wrong. Maybe my perspective on it is wrong. Maybe my conditioning is, maybe I'm so covered over that I'm not able to get the full picture. So introspection. The next thing is prayer, praying to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And there's a beautiful collection of verses to praying to the Srimad-Bhagavatam, prayers by Sanatana Goswami that we can recite, or we can pray from our own heart, praying to the Srimad-Bhagavatam for guidance, for shelter. If we're having problems with something within the Srimad-Bhagavatam, then turning to the Srimad-Bhagavatam, because the Srimad-Bhagavatam is an incarnation of Krishna, so personal, right? And praying to personalities in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So if in this particular pastime with Parashuram and others, as they come along in the ninth canto, we can pray to those personalities, especially the devotees, the incarnations of Krishna that we might be reading about. Please help me to understand this. This is really causing me some difficulty. I'm not able to relate. And we can pray to our previous acharyas and to Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual predecessors for answers from within. Then that's internal process still, that process of prayer. Then even more active, perhaps externally more active, is actively seeking out answers and guidance from thoughtful devotees within our community, those devotees who have carefully studied and thought about these concerns and issues, who have dealt with these sorts of doubts before, who have found ways to help appease these doubts in others, and looking for those devotees who have more faith than we do. So like Chaitanya Charan Prabhu demonstrated this yesterday in his class, he shared this point that Parashuram removed the corrupt elements within the following, from the 21 generations following after he is, this is coming up in the next few verses, but after Parashuram killed the Kshatriyas that weren't ruling well and who were corrupt, we often think that he killed 21 consecutive generations, so waiting for the next one to be born. And I always had that thought and always that question. So that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu said it's almost a sadistic way of, approach where you wait for the next generation to produce a child and then you immediately kill them and so on. So he said what actually the way to understand this is that he killed that corrupt consciousness within the following 21 generations after removing those corrupt people that would have transmitted those values to their next generation. So that in that sense is an example of how actively seeking answers to our questions can help a lot with our doubts and our concerns. Then applying our intelligence. This is another thing we can do with doubts. Applying our intelligence. Prabhupada wanted us to be thoughtful. So what is the point that this pastime is making? Really asking ourselves that. And in yesterday's verse, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu in his class, he was saying that Parashuram's, the point of the pastime where he killed his siblings and his own mother, it wasn't the details of that story that were the point of the point was to demonstrate, to glorify Parashuram's virtuous qualities, his presence of mind, his equanimity in the situation, and the way that he expertly dealt with his father's anger. So that was the point, to glorify Parashuram's virtues within that context. So applying our intelligence in that way. There's a study, the branch of knowledge, that deals with how we interpret scripture and philosophical texts. And that branch is called hermeneutics. And this term is becoming a little bit more widely known within ISKCON. Hermeneutics, the study of interpreting our scripture. So if we're not familiar with this, we can ask devotees. We can, there's devotees on the Shastric Advisory Committee who have put together a whole course on on this very topic of understanding and interpreting our scripture. So some of the key elements of this study is that the context in which a certain philosophical point is made is critical. It's really important to understand the context for that. We don't just take a quote out of context, right? So understanding the context. And then also understanding which aspects of the Bhagavatam are prescriptive and which are descriptive. So prescriptive is, this is something that we need to be applying to our lives. This is universally. And descriptive, it's just a detail and something that they're describing. It's not saying, oh, you should be doing this. It's saying this is what was happening at the time, right? So separating those two things, prescriptive and descriptive. And then also principles versus details. So the essential principles of our philosophy and of the teachings of the Bhagavatam versus the details, the things that are changeable according to time, place, and circumstance. So those are very important and necessary ways to go about understanding and applying the teachings of the Bhagavatam. And so, like I mentioned, if this is an area that's newer to you, this study of this hermeneutical process, then there are devotees who are very involved with this, and the Shastric Advisory Committee has a course on it as well. So it's very exciting to think that we can, with our intelligence, we can, and humility, we can approach the scripture, and actually there are ways to understand that won't disrupt our spiritual life. So then the final point in dealing with our doubts is acceptance. Some things I'm just not going to understand right now. And with my current conditioning, this really ruffles my feathers. So I'm going to just put this on the back burner, and I'm going to focus on what I do relate to, what I do relate with. And I'm going to particularly seek out those things that I find really hope-giving, encouraging, that I do resonate with, those pastimes or those aspects of the philosophy or those aspects of Krishna or his devotees and so on. So really focusing on those things that do enhance my faith and leaving the rest on the back burner, having faith that the answers will come in due time. So seeking out those things in Krishna consciousness that soften our hearts. So oftentimes when a doubt arises, it creates a hardening over the heart. Because it can be painful, right? And this thing, I don't agree with this, I don't relate with this. And so it can create kind of cold-heartedness feeling. So the opposite of that is finding those things that soften our heart, open them, whether it's kirtan, whether it's a certain service, whether it's a certain aspect of the philosophy. So, and then knowing that in due course of time, the answers will come. There's that beautiful and encouraging quote in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad where it says, if one has unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, the essence of all Vedic knowledge is revealed to him or her. So that's very encouraging, knowing, yes, in due course of time, I will understand. And for now, I won't bother myself with this. Of course, like all the previous steps, you can also actively try to get the answers that we need. But in some cases, this is important to just put it on the back burner. So sometimes down the road, we're given a bigger picture explanation that solves the problem. For example, if we were reading Krishna book and we didn't get some of the backstories to the pastimes, it would be very problematic for our minds. We would probably think, well, why did Krishna allow his siblings to be in the prison? His siblings, Vasudeva and Devaki's children, why did he allow them to be killed? Because we didn't know if we didn't know the backstory, that could cause a great doubt in the mind. But once we know the backstory of those children, then it's appeasing to the heart. Oh yes, okay, there's a bigger picture here. And similarly, Krishna knocking down the two twin Arjun trees, these beautiful, right? These beautiful trees. You could say, oh, why is Krishna destroying the landscape? our doubt could set in. But if we didn't know the backstory about Nala Kuvera, Manikriva, and the whole history. So trusting that this bigger picture explanation is going to come down the road if we're very sincere and if we show up for Krishna repeatedly, show up for the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and have this mood of humble inquiry. I've seen in my own life, again and again, as doubts have arisen across my lifetime, that they have been cleared up over time. Maybe not immediately, sometimes, and that's wonderful, but sometimes it comes with time and perseverance. Like we mentioned earlier, the cowherd boys running toward Krishna, they didn't wait on the side questioning, why is there a demon here? So keep showing up. Let's keep showing up for Krishna. And over time, those doubts will be resolved. So I'd just like to briefly summarize what we've covered. So we talked about how in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that this material world is, he particularly says that we have to be very cautious and sagacious, otherwise we're going to suffer from sinful activities, and that this is the lesson of the Vedic literature. And so I touched on how this material world's like a sticky web. No matter what we do, we're going to accidentally hurt people. We're going to disrupt things, even if we're trying our best not to. And that the only real shelter is taking shelter of Krishna. He's our way out of the cave of this material world. He's going to show us the exit. Then we touched on dealing with doubts in general, especially in the context of the 9th canto and the different pastimes that we're going to read that may bring things up for us and confuse us. So I mentioned there's 2 main approaches to dealing with doubts. One is dealing with doubts in the way that turns us away from Krishna and away from his devotees and creates a rift and can lead to isolation. And in that context, I mentioned if we as a community can help devotees to not isolate, but to feel comfortable sharing as their doubts come up so that they can stay in the fold of the community. And then the other aspect of dealing with doubts is methods that help us come closer to Krishna and his devotees. And in that, there's the turning to Krishna within the heart, like Arjuna did, turning over our doubts to Krishna, running to Krishna with our doubts. It requires the mood of humility, knowing that I don't even know what's going on inside of my own body, what to speak of within this material universe or spiritual universe. It requires introspection, examining why is this doubt? Why is this thing upsetting me so much? Why is this pastime bothering me so much? It's helped by prayer to Srimad-Bhagavatam, to the devotees, to the personalities within the Bhagavatam, making the Bhagavatam come to life for us by interacting being personalists, right? Approaching the Bhagavatam and the personalities within the Bhagavatam who are still approachable, still accessible, I should say. Then another point is actively seeking out answers and guidance from devotees who have thought about these and studied and carefully considered the answers to our questions. Then next was applying our intelligence and learning about some of these principles of interpreting scripture, these hermeneutical principles of distinguishing prescriptive from descriptive, understanding the context and separating principles from details. And finally, accepting that I might not understand some things right now, but I'm going to put these on the back burner and I'm going to trust that these answers that I'm seeking are going to come to me in due course of time and that I'll get a bigger picture. So keeping that hope. So thank you all so much. And I'd love to open it up now to any reflections, any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you, Shyamala. This was such a nourishing class, honestly. Radhika and I were just reflecting on how you brought us a nice overview of the 9th canto, how to deal with passages that seem, really like, they generate doubt and they're like, well, and you also wonder, like, what are they doing in the 9th canto, right? Or in the Bhagavatam, and how to use doubt to approach Krishna and get closer to him. Honestly, I thought it was really nourishing and brilliant. And I hope you can come regularly on this channel and enlighten us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I like to reflect on how the ninth canto, it's almost like a churning, we ought to get through some of these things in order to proceed to the 10th. So it's a good opportunity to turn to Krishna even more so. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Shyamala.
Hare Krishna.
I have to bounce off, but it's just such a delight to see you. And for people to know, Shyamala taught a ladies teaching the Bhagavatam class. And as you can see from this class, she's such a shining example of how to do it. Thank you. That was such an excellent class. And the point that I really loved is that you're saying, I don't even know what's going on in my own body. How can I expect to know? I love that point so much. As you know, I'm an asana teacher getting ready to teach. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. How can I presume to know that I know the cosmic outlook? So thank you. And Damodar Swami Maharaj always talks about hermeneutics. So I'm glad that that term is getting out there in the world because it is very, very useful. So Haribol, nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So any other reflections or thoughts that anybody has?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Shyamala Prabhu. It's Andrea, of your fellow Gainesville person as well. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you taking the time to do this type of explanation, because when Urmila Devi Dasi, who was here previously, she also talked about hermeneutics. But it's not a class that I think got recorded, or I haven't been able to find it again. And she referred to the documents from the Shastric site console, and I looked at them, and they're amazing. But it's a lot to digest, and the way that you presented it today was in a very practical, easy to digest way of what's in all those documents. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to share that when I was having a lot of doubts, when I was first diving into the Gita, let alone the Srimad-Bhagavatam, one of the things that really helped me was, having my husband and other people remind me of the intention of Prabhupada, and reading about him in the Lilamrita and understanding how much he suffered and how good of a person he was, and how he really had the best intentions of everyone at heart. And he really saw everyone as a spirit soul, and he wanted to help everyone get out of the material world. And when I would get that understanding, not just from the Lilamrita, but from his disciples that I would talk to, and also like learning how he was with his female disciples and having that understanding, it would put everything in context. So like, even if I would read something that seemed very harsh, I could be like, oh, Prabhupada, okay, that sounds a little bit harsh, but I understand that there must be another reason behind that. And just kind of having that faith and that understanding. I don't know if that made myself clear, but thank you so much.
Yes, you did. Thank you. That's a really helpful tip as well, is to focus on the aspects of Srila Prabhupada, his life and his actual dealings with devotees and the softness of his heart. And that's connects to that idea of focusing on aspects of Krishna consciousness and with the devotees that we really, that soften our heart in bhakti. And instead of festering in the things that make us feel cold and that feel harsh and so on. So I love that you brought that up. Actually, I've noticed in my life too, that when I have struggled sometimes with certain things that Srila Prabhupada has written or said, that it helps so much when I go and watch some of the videos of Srila Prabhupada just giving class, or, the following Srila Prabhupada series and so on, to remember, oh yeah, this is Srila Prabhupada, in his entirety. That not separating him as a person from the things that he wrote. Thank you.
I also put the link for Urmila Devi's recent class, Andrea, that you were looking for. So that's in the chat. It's on the channel Temple at Bhakti. The Temple at
The
Bhakti
one where
session.
she talked about the hermeneutics.
I don't remember if she spoke about it recently.
Yeah, I was looking for the one specifically where she spoke about the hermeneutics, because I was at the one that she did very recently, but I'll check anyway. Thank you so much.
Okay, and the next couple of days, again, we have more great speakers, practically every day, actually, some wonderful speakers that Anand Bihari Prabhu is organizing. Achyuta Gopi tomorrow, it's Ekadashi, And Sunday will be our own Jamuna Jaya, who I don't believe has spoken on this channel before. She's a fountain of wisdom. I mean, she's really, really deep and a great devotee that everyone loves. So please tune in daily if you can. Anyone have any questions?
Hare Krishna. I'm going to put Urmila Prabhu's points in the chat board. I have them saved. The Hermeneutics one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So whoever we can copy and paste that out into our.
Yeah, copy and paste before I end the class.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Shyamala Kishori, it was great. Thanks for including the audience in the class. It was great. Thanks everyone for speaking. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was really, really wonderful to be with all of you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.